8:42. Now, Stephen Fry has been very candid in the past about his struggle with bipolar disorder and depression. He's made programmes for the BBC about it. And now, in the third part of his autobiography, he's dealing with his dependency in the past on drink and drugs.
We'll be talking to Stephen about that particular period of his life in just a moment. First, let's remind ourselves of why he continues to be one of Britain's best-loved personalities.
I find myself humbled, honoured, and in the best sense of the word, paid to be here.
Is English capable of sustaining demagoguery?
Demagoguery?
Demagoguery.
And by demagoguery you mean?
By demagoguery I mean demagoguery.
I thought so.
We have to be out there and show them that we're proud of who we are, and that's why it's called pride. You look superb.
Thank you very much.
You must envy my body enormously. Happy? Ha! I remember that. 7 years old, ice cream, holidays. That was happy. Not since then, really.
Are you incapable of rational thought? You cannot be that stupid.
So, if you'd be a real darling and oblige... I shall never wash my eyes again.
He's here. Stephen Fry, good morning.
Morning to you, Sally.
Friends in high places. Leo DiCaprio, my goodness.
Yes, I made a complete spectacular idiot of myself last weekend. I worked all Sunday on a Radio 4 Extra programme. I was comedy curating for the channel. And I thought I'd have a nap. And the nap just grew and grew, and then I woke up rather groggily and looked at the phone, and I saw that I had missed tea with Al Pacino. And I just thought, that's ridiculous. You don't fall asleep knowing that you're going to have tea with Al Pacino and then just go blow him out, you know?
What did you do?
There was a huge space of emails from my PA and from his people saying, they were very concerned. Are you okay, Mr. Fry? Is everything all right? Al hopes there's no problem. And I just grovelled back saying, no, they're terrible. I had a sleep problem.
A sleep problem.
I've just got visions of Al Pacino sitting alone at a table in a cafe in London, just waiting for Stephen Fry.
With those dark, hollow, menacing eyes, slightly unshaven as I am, unfortunately, this morning. And yes, the man who can command many to kill.
You said something really interesting there, which was, I made a total fool of myself. Your book, More Fool Me. And reading the book, you're really tough on yourself, aren't you?
Well, I think it's an advantage of age. We roll through the cycles of our life, and we look back at certain episodes, certain behaviours, certain lifestyles that we seem to just get dipped into or dip ourselves into. And you want to shout at that person in the past. I don't know if you ever have dreams where you sit your exams again, or you get a second chance to do something that you feel you've screwed up with. And I felt that really about this period in the 90s when everything was at my feet, if you'd like. And for some reason, some part of me just wanted to blow it all away in this kind of blizzard of partying and it's a subject that's very difficult to talk about because a lot of people just immediately turn off and go, oh, it's another celeb moaning and wringing their hands about their addiction, and we've had enough of this. They should have manned up and just not done it, and I agree. On the other hand, addictive substances are addictive, and they fill a gap in the lives of certain people who are most vulnerable to them, and those, of course, are particularly those with a mental disorder. If your moods are not easy to control, and you don't really understand what's wrong with you, then the easiest thing is to say, well, if I'm really just too high and hyper, alcohol just brings me down, and if I'm too low, cocaine perks me up. I mean, it's a silly equation, and they chase each other and get each other worse and worse and worse. Alcohol, of course, is a depressant, so it drives you to have more coke. Coke actually makes you want to drink more alcohol, and so you become more and more of a mess. I was fortunate in as much as my absolute passion for everything I do overrode any any professional engagement. I don't think I was late for anything, or go on stage in a Wired or in a State or film, in that way. It was a party thing. I know it's a terrible cliche, but it was a party thing. I hate parties. I don't think I've ever met anybody in my life or been to a place I hate more than I hate parties. Unless they're people sitting around the table with a glass of wine chatting. But parties with music and yelling and music and yelling and more music, and I just can't bear them. But this strange little powder from South America, for some reason, stimulates you enough to be in a mood to endure parties.
So it's a self-medication almost.
It's called self-medication in the trade, and I know a lot of people are very unsympathetic about that and say, "Oh, come on, call it what it is." It's like Ben Elton used to do years ago, a set on people who appear on television saying that they experimented with drugs when they were in their 20s. And he said, "Yeah, I've been experimenting with lager for 30 years." It's not about letting oneself off the hook. It's really just about the fact that I've written 3 autobiographies, and I've wanted them all to be completely honest. And this is a very honest road bump in my life that if I left out, people who knew me would say that was a deliberate evasion. Some might even say, some malicious people might say, he sanitized his autobiography, leaving out the massive, problem of the 90s.
How does it feel now, on the other side of writing the book, to have been so honest? Did you get from writing it what you hoped to get?
I think so. I know there are people all over this country who are addicted in various degrees to different substances. And they are divided into 2 classes. There are very lucky people like me who, because we have money and position, or whatever we want to call it, can kind of hide it, or at least get away with it. And there are those who are driven from their homes and live in the streets, or cluster together in crack dens or crystal meth factories or whatever. And for them, life is much harder. Their drug is cheaper, more infectiously addictive, and it's not as pleasant to be utterly dependent on something like that, or heroin. Not that it's pleasant to be dependent on cocaine. So there is a lot of a sort of anger amongst some social workers who say that the police are not interested in arresting white middle-class people who take cocaine in media bars at night because they don't threaten the streets or the good order of the city. Whereas marauding gangs of crystal meth addicts who need more money, or heroin addicts, they do threaten the peace of the city. So there's an unfair charge that the comfortably off don't get any police attention for committing a crime, which is ingesting a Class A drug. And
did you ever worry about exposure? Did you ever think, or was that part of it?
It's a very good question. I don't know. I mean, it's a sort of slow, pernicious suicide in a way. You know that you can't carry on doing it. In your brain, you say, I can't just every time I'm free and I've got an evening, I can't just go off into a gentleman's lavatory and chop up lines of this ridiculous powder and snort it up. I mean, it's doing something to my brain. I've seen people who've been on it for longer than me who are utterly a mess. I think we can all know and think of people who've died of it, famous singers and performers. It puts a strain on the heart because it raises the metabolism, and it increases the amount of alcohol one wants. And of course, it sort of dives on down into society if you can't afford it because it's quite expensive. Though it's held its price, which I think is one of the things that's quite surprising about it, because it used in the 1980s to be about £60 for a gram of cocaine, and it's now about £40 for a gram of cocaine. But you don't know what it's cut with. I mean, so you get all the way from South America comes this coca, which has been acid-based, reduced into crystals or into a paste and hidden in a vase, or gosh knows what, smuggled in somehow through Spain. And then it's given to the big people whom I never meet. You meet the little dealers who are ordinary people, students who just life's gone a bit wrong, and as the newspapers call them, they're the ones we should punish, the pushers. They don't never push it on you. They're being pushed all the time. People say, oh, get me a couple of grams. I can't, I haven't got any. Come on, I need some. You know, it's very much a buyer's market, not a seller's market. I mean, a seller's market, not a buyer's market. And so they take it and they need to make a profit out of it, and they cut it with baby laxative and all kinds of distressing objects to make it seem like real cocaine.
The book is dealing very much with your experience with drink and drugs in the 90s. How are you doing? How are you doing now?
Well, I'm more of a normal mid-50s citizen now, I'm happy to say. What hasn't gone away is what I think is probably the underlying cause, which is often the case with alcoholics or people who are dependent, which is why you chose to numb yourself away from the real world in the first place. And that is the illness that I have, which was recently re-diagnosed by my psychiatrist as bipolar 1, and I had thought rather cheerfully it was cyclothymia or bipolar 2, which are less serious. And so he changed the sort of regime of medication for me. And I was really, really knocked for six by the death of Robin Williams. He, far more talented, but a similar track of cocaine and alcohol use, and then he stopped. And then very recently, as we know, he could take it no more. A man who gave such extraordinary pleasure. And even the films people criticised him for, the slightly sentimental ones, were because that's how he was. He was such a soft, sweet, kind man. And I've seen him in rooms being more funny than I think all collective comedians put together in history have been. You know, I mean, it's not that he was funny, he was funny. Well, whatever funniness is, he was it. And he would come off stage, sweat everywhere. And I remember Dick Cavett saying to him in a changing room, he said, Robin, you just made 3,000 people happier than they've ever been in their lives. Robin said, it's crazy, I can't make myself happy.
Does what's happened to him scare you about yourself?
It does scare me, because it's, all those years of him fighting. He's older than me. And the other one was Philip Seymour Hoffman. I mean, I never took heroin, but I was on a Broadway show when he was, and we came downtown, I was in the West Village, and there were all these people standing outside an apartment holding candles, and I went forward and said, what's going on? They said, oh, haven't you heard? Philip Seymour Hoffman died. I said, how? Because I'd met him several times at BAFTA Awards and things, and, a very solid, grounded person, always drank, a soft drink, and everyone sort of knew he was not an alcoholic, or at least rather he was an alcoholic and therefore didn't ever drink. And it was a pretty known secret that 20 years before or something he'd been a heroin addict. And he'd gone into his house and he'd stacked up boxes, virtually, of heroin. He'd turned the corner. And Aaron Sorkin, who wrote West Wing, wrote this marvellous article for the New York Times, who himself, he'd had a cocaine problem all the way through West Wing. He and Philip Seymour Hoffman were outside the soundstage, and they said to each other, as ex-addicts, talking about their history. And Aaron Sorkin said, I don't believe I was a real addict, because I just sniffed up through my nose, but you were finding veins, and the veins harden, and you find a new one, and you pump it up, and a new one, and then one here, and then here, and here, and then in your private parts, and then in your tongue, and your eyeball. That's how desperate heroin addicts get. They have to find a new source because the veins harden. I think I'm too squeamish to be a proper addict. And Philip Seymour Hoffman said, stay squeamish. And 3 weeks later, he was dead. Extraordinary. 23 years he had been completely clean. So it's chronic in the literal sense of the word. It lives with you forever. It just doesn't go away, like asthma or diabetes or something. You have to learn to manage it. And I have a marvellous doctor who helps me. I see him as often as I can, and I'm very lucky in that regard. He's very firm with me.
Yeah, Stephen, thank you so much for your honesty this morning. It's a fascinating read, and I'm sure a lot of people will be helped by that honesty. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Stephen Fry's new book is called More Fool Me.
Carol's got